Hey, Scott Jordan and Mark Warner here for Jancast number 135 for Thursday, November 10th, 2022. And geez, the last time we were on doing a show, we were talking about my birthday, Halloween. Hey, how was Halloween at your house, Mark?
We had some treaters and trickers.
Yeah. Did you make them do anything to be able to get the candy bars or like a song and dance or anything?
No, we just begged them not to soap our car windows.
Were you giving out the big Snicker bars or the regular Snicker bars?
Pre-packaged M&Ms.
Oh, there you go.
I
Okay,
figured it was kind of safe.
cool. Well, I enjoyed my Halloween birthday. I was not at home, so I wasn't involved in giving out any candies, but I did have a beer or two on my birthday, so that counts. I got my own trick or treating going on there.
Well, for the record, on your birthday, you're allowed to have more than two.
Yeah. So this is like an all news show. We got some good stuff to report on, a lot of stuff going on out there. So let's get into it because I know our listeners can't wait to hear what's going on out there in the world, right?
Oh, absolutely. And we're in the news, all the news that's fit to
talk about.
Yeah, we'll go with that. One of the biggest things, it's been a lot of the talk in the last couple of weeks, was the ISSA show.
Yeah.
And although it wasn't the size of some of the shows prior to 2019,
Wait,
pre-COVID.
You mean it wasn't the largest show ever?
It wasn't the largest show ever. However, with that said, I was really impressed with the people that went out of their way to attend that show. I mean, the quality of the people. The conversations that happened were all really quite superior.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I know it was a climb in attendance over last year, but last year was an anomaly to begin with. And last year was a 10,000% increase over the year before, where there was no show. So it's on a climb back. And I was real impressed with the attendees. The people that attended were there. It appeared to me, Scott, that they were there on a mission. Again, thinking about, the fact that they wanted to get information, they wanted to figure some things out. And the other thing I noticed about the show, Scott, was I don't think the town, and of course it was Chicago, but I don't think they were ready for a show with as big a turnout as it turned out to be.
Yeah.
Because, some of the comments that I got from employees in the hotels were, they were caught a little bit off guard and understaffed because they didn't realize how magnetic the ISSA show is to people in our industry. So people came in from all over. What I didn't see a lot of that I remember seeing in shows pre-COVID were a lot of attendees from like Asia and Europe.
You're right.
And
you mention it. Yeah.
But and so that might have affected the overall count. But I was impressed with the show.
Yeah, no, and I could say from a Bullen standpoint, we got a very good number of leads, and again, good quality leads, and we're doing the follow up with those customers, and sometimes you expect that somebody would say, well, thanks a lot, but I'm really not interested. Everybody we engaged with in our booth, we scanned their badges and all that, and took notes. We're following up with them. They're all pursuing whatever the specific product or subject we discussed with them. So yeah, good quality. I'm sure we're going to land quite a few good new accounts as well as adding additional products to existing accounts. So yeah, from a quality and timing and all that, it's all good. We'll see what happens. See what happens next year. But I can guarantee you the food service is going to be better next year.
I think you're right on
Couldn't
that.
be much worse. You can't wait 2 hours for a hot dog
and
then find out that they ran out by the time you get there. But
no,
yeah.
I'll tell you the other interesting thing before we jump off the show is I was involved with several of the education sessions.
Yeah.
And in the past, there were education sessions that would go on, and there were, the entire 6 people in the audience. But in this particular instance, Some of the education sessions were standing room only,
Yeah.
people kind of flooding out into the aisle, and everybody wanted to learn something. And, these are the on the floor education sessions that I'm referring to in
Yeah.
the little theaters. And that seemed to be a really big draw this year.
Yep.
And so I was glad to be part of that, and impressed to see the level of interest.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
One of the things that we were had the opportunity to talk about in some of these things is what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
And there is so much going on in the world that directly relates to the cleaning industry, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty exciting stuff. I mean, we've come from 3-4 years ago, people didn't even know what dwell time is, to now, we're getting, well, the thing we're going to talk about next, the RSV, we're getting people calling us up, emailing us saying, what do you got? They're all into it. So let's get into some of that news, because it's pretty important stuff to be able to deal with it properly.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that COVID-19 is not gone, it's
Yeah.
kind of dropped off the radar screen from the news cycle in general, and it's become somewhat less lower mortality rate as it's evolved.
Yeah.
I mean, more people get infected, but it's getting more like the common flu. But the thing that everybody's talking about now is, the respiratory syncytial virus, which affects the infants, kids.
Yeah.
And so that's been all over the news. The hospitals are facing some of the worst surges they've seen in 25 years with kids, just coming in with crazy high numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and fortunately, Bullen does have some products that are effective against it, even though I think its primary transmission is airborne, right, Mark? Or am I wrong on that?
That's a really good question. I'm not really sure I know the answer to that. I think some of the protocols that I've seen put a really strong emphasis on surface cleaning.
Yeah.
So it boils back down to making sure that we're doing the right things environmentally. When I think of airbornes, I think of SARS-CoV-2,
Yeah.
which causes, COVID-19. And that one was, dynamically airborne. But, obviously RSV, I think, is putting a big emphasis on surface cleaning, which is
Okay.
why disinfectants that have the right claims is so relevant right now. But as you know, and the reason why, we're waffling on that is because you're talking about something that causes people to sneeze and cough, right? I mean, it's a virus that's kind of like, it's a respiratory virus. So
Right.
there is got to be an airborne element to it, as well as a surface-borne element.
Yeah.
So I'm not totally sure how we would classify that, since it could be broadcast in both ways, spread both ways, off surfaces and through, direct contact with somebody that's sneezing and coughing and hacking all over you at the seat behind you in the airplane.
Well, when we first started getting the questions, I started looking into, okay, what products do we have that are effective, and have it listed on the efficacy data. And it was pretty interesting in that, it's like a product like our Eric 75, which is effective against TB, very, very powerful disinfectant product, doesn't have the claim. And it's like, well, why would that not have the claim, but some of the other products do, that maybe aren't quite as effective or not as broad as the 75? Well, it all depends on at what stage that specific pathogen was placed on the master label. And something like Eric 75, while it has a whole bunch of other interesting claims, doesn't have RSV at all. And my only guess is they're probably going to add that to it. But when the products are originally developed, they have to look at, okay, what do we have testing data for? What don't we have testing data for? And some of the products that do have RSV on the efficacy data probably are slightly later products, maybe, so that they added that in. It's kind of like the emerging pathogen thing that COVID-2 wasn't on the label, but they allowed it. If you killed this, then you can do that. Now we've just finished a year and a half of updating every single label we have, so it now says COVID-2 on the label. But I think the RSV will probably end up being in that same cycle. So if you're wondering, if you got noticed that we've already sent out emails about what products we have effective, and we'll put it in the show notes under the Bullen brands. But that's why not every product has it, or the products you would think that would be more effective against it just because of everything else they are effective against. That's why they don't have it. So it's kind of hard to figure that out, but it has a lot to do with the timing, I think.
And you bring up a good point. I think one of the smartest moves that the EPA made was in going down the path of creating statements regarding emerging pathogens. And, that gives the ability for us as a society to respond to some of these new emerging pathogens, and it's not just them that we worry about. There's some re-emerging pathogens that are also concerned. I mean, some of the things that pop up in the news, and we'll put a link to this, but there's a chart that shows all kinds of re-emerging diseases, like Ebola isn't done with us yet. It keeps re-emerging.
You're hearing about that in the news on a regular basis now. This worldwide map is kind of scary to look at, quite honestly.
Well, it covers things like MRSA, that's flesh-eating bacteria, right? Staph. And things like C. diff, which is, rampant. It can be rampant form of infection in long-term care facilities and hospitals and so on. And, the other one that's kind of re-emerging is CRE. CRE's been around for a long time, but we're seeing evidence of biofilms in drains actually containing CRE, and just the faucet drain splash kicks it up into the airspace. Now that's like, are you kidding? Like, you can't use a sink to get clean without a fear of whether or not the drain's been cleaned recently. So that's kind of some of the re-emerging stuff that we worry about. And then the newly emerging things are a little scary too. That gets into things like the H's and the N's. Remember that? We had H1N1, H2, H3, and H4, N5, but H7N9, H5N1, all of those were nicknamed bird flu, swine flu, and all that. And they're still going on. They're a zoonotic form of disease, which means that it comes from some initial source, transfers to an animal that allows it then to transfer to a human being. And that's, bird flu, swine flu, that's where all those names come from. But the things that I get all the time is people saying, like, what about monkeypox? Did that come from monkeys? No, it didn't come from monkeys. But monkeypox has been on the news like crazy too, So, that one is under control. We've been watching the charts on that. And although it spiked really rapidly, it decreased almost as rapidly. And that's not unusual for infectious diseases. They kind of, even Ebola, Scott, it hits really hard, and then it just kind of fades away. It doesn't go away forever, though. You always worry about it coming back. So, it makes me think, remember back in the day when we were worried about mosquitoes and Zika virus? It's like, how do you avoid mosquitoes? Live in a bubble, or not go outside? So, some of those things were really kind of horrifying. Bottom line is, though, I think with all these emerging pathogens, wow, it's the president calling to chime in. But
he always calls at the wrong time.
I mean, like hemorrhagic fevers and all that kind of stuff are still floating around, and I think that's what that call was probably about. Sorry about that.
Well, all this is pointing towards a huge market. We already know the global surface disinfectant market in 2021 reached $5.1 billion, and we're on track going by 2027 to be 7.6 billion. So that's what CAGR is, right? The compound annual growth rate, Mark, of course.
I knew that.
It's going to be 6.87% between 21 and 27. So things are not slowing down. If anything, it's going to pick up. And fortunately, Bullen is a leader in pathogen control, as we have been for the last 20 to 30 years. So we're positioned very nicely. It's just putting a heavy load on the professionals that have to do it, though.
Yeah, and actually, we've been hearing that there's been some news on that,
Yep.
articles about that, and surveys regarding, what kind of pressures people are feeling from that. So there was a survey that was done by the ISSA recently that really dove into, I think, somewhere around 500 or so cleaning professionals, and double that in terms of consumers, and all of them were feeling tons of pressure to make sure that they were cleaning and
Yeah.
disinfecting properly. And honestly, Scott, that's music to my ears, because I can remember back in the day watching people clean and disinfect and doing it completely wrong. They didn't know what dwell time was. They're walking it down doing a spray and wipe the same way you might put glass cleaner on a piece of glass. And the reality of it is that people are starting to understand there's a lot of different steps that are, we got to do. We've got to pre-clean the surface, then apply it, give it some dwell time, recover
Yep.
it, or allow it to air dry after the appropriate amount of time. And in a lot of cases, we're also seeing standards revolving around the requirement to use potable water as a rinse,
Hmm.
especially if there's going to be skin contact or something like that. That's the law in food service, but it's a really strong recommendation, or a should, as it relates to the practices that people do on any surface that's contact with skin. You think
Yeah.
about a baby changing station, right? Yeah, it might be disinfected with a high grade disinfectant, but it would really be nice to know before you lay your baby down on it that somebody rinsed it, right?
Yeah.
And the surface that we bring up often is the surface that all of us touch with bare skin at least several times a day. And that's like the toilet seat. So we know
Hmm.
that an awful lot of bathroom cleaners are pretty aggressive disinfectants, and it would be nice to know people were practicing a best practice
Yeah.
in forms of rinsing it before it came in contact with skin. So there's just kind of some thoughts on all of this. I know that people are feeling pressure because people know this now. Nobody knew this stuff
Yeah.
before, Scott.
Yeah.
We'd say stuff like this and at cocktail parties, and people would walk away going, "Don't talk to that guy." But now, like, you bring that up at a cocktail party, everybody circles around going, "Whoa, whoa, wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Say that again."
Tell me about dwell time, please.
so so there is pressure, and that's kind of good. It's the issue that people have a higher degree of awareness puts us all on
Yep.
on stage. It gives us the ability to demonstrate what it is we know and how we perform and all that kind of stuff. And it also makes people that don't have the right kind of training or education or knowledge in this business, makes them stand out too.
Yep. Yep.
So I think it's really a good thing for the industry that all this has gone on in
Yeah.
that sense. That's made people aware of the fact that there's a right way and a wrong way to do stuff, and the fact that these emerging pathogens and re-emerging pathogens are out there, and what we've just lived through in the last 2.5 years. I think everybody wants to know more about this. I
Yeah.
find that there's just this huge thirst, because people do not want to get sick.
Yep.
And one way to avoid that is to disinfect properly. But I heard there's other ways.
Well, okay, we're going to close out this Jancast, and people are going to think, okay, this is a funny story, but it's based on an actual study. So the headline is cannabis users have less severe COVID-19 symptoms. Boy, doesn't that bring you right in there? Whoa, what? Whoa. So
Who
this
would
is
have
the
thought pot was going to be considered a protective factor,
Yeah,
right?
so the findings came from an analysis of 1,831 COVID patients admitted to two medical centers in California. And the study suggested that active cannabis users hospitalized with COVID-19 had better clinical outcomes compared with non-users. So, the elections just took place 2 days ago, and we're publishing this show on Thursday. We're waiting to hear, but there was 5 more states that were going to potentially legalize marijuana as the result of the elections this week. Now, I think most of them were supposedly going to pass pretty easily, but the more you hear that, and then on top of that, this study, it's pretty interesting. And blatant product plug, but if you are smoking or whatever you're doing, you probably could use some Can of Clean smoke eliminator as well. So we're allowed to tie that in with the news, right, Mark?
Yep, that's a BPP, blatant product plug.
Yeah.
But it's relevant, and the fact that it's so mainstream now.
Yeah.
One of the biggest concerns that goes on regarding cannabis use, is like hotel rooms and hospitality and the industry in general. So the fact that it's somewhat legalized in almost every state, or it's getting there.
Yeah.
And it kind of leads for a need for a product like that, and then there's vaping, which has to do with different types of ingredients. It could be
a lot of flavored stuff.
I mean, even flavored tobacco back in the day, cigars and pipes. Tobacco would be a problem in hospitality, whether it was hotel rooms or even restaurants. So there's a lot of
to close out that study, however, that says researchers did not find that those who use cannabis had better overall survival rates. There's no indication that cannabis or any CBD products can cure COVID-19. Kind of makes me think of back in the day when I held up the Corona beer and said there was no connection between Corona beer, and that show went viral, by the way. It's up to 45,000 views or something. But so we're not reporting this news to give you any indication that smoking marijuana or pot is going to cure COVID-19. It's just some studies that I'm sure they're going to continue to do more work on these type of studies going forward. But good way to end the show, right?
Well, the researchers did find that people that use cannabis have less of a need for ICU treatments or mechanical ventilators. Maybe it's because they practice the inhalation technique. So,
okay, well, with that said, I think that's a perfect segue to exit the Jancast for this week. Good stuff. And the next show, we will have a special guest on, which we're not going to tip you off as to who that is. So in 2 weeks, we'll have another new show coming at you. But thanks a lot for tuning in. And thank you, Mark, for joining me again in another spectacular Jancast.
And thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. See ya.